Coming up, the story of the young Chippewa Band and the lack of land. I'm David Curtin. You're listening to Meeting Ground. The young Chippewa Reserve is the traditional home of the Plains Cree people. But the people of the young Chippewa Reserve have no land, no reserve. In the 1870s, indigenous people were facing a crisis. The fur trade was declining. There were devastating epidemics brought over by the colonizers. Ruthless whiskey traders moved into the area. And the buffalo were disappearing. There are 30 square miles of excellent farmland located near the present town of Laird that was granted to Chief Chipewyan and his people in 1876. In 1877, Chief Chipewyan died. His son, young Chipewyan, became chief. But he was now chief of a starving people, many of whom would become dependent on corrupt Indian agents for food. Others attempted to hunt. But then came the 1885 resistance, and the federal government, fearing that First Nations people would join Louis Riel's Métis, took their guns away. Young Chipewyan heard that buffalo had been sighted down south, and he and his people headed to Cypress Hills to find food. The young Chipewyan people were scared of returning to this land for fear of reprisal from the Indian agents, and eventually many of them made their home with bands near North Battleford. In 1897, Ottawa took the land away from the young Chipewyan band, even though none were ever told. The land was eventually given to Mennonite and Lutheran settlers whose descendants are still living there today. Then many years later, in the 1970s, members of the young Chipewyan band started coming into the town of Laird, insisting that this was their traditional land. They could have been run out of town, and in fact, at first many wished they would just go away. But eventually the Mennonites and Lutherans did their homework, and they too discovered that the land they live on is in fact the former reserve of the young Chipewyan First Nation. The battle the young Chipewyan band has is with the federal government, and it is ongoing. But they are not alone. In August of 2006, a group of 130 or so, young Chipewyans, Mennonites, and Lutherans, gathered at Stony Knoll, the highest and most sacred place on the now former reserve, to commemorate the 130th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 6. But more importantly, to signal that they would continue the journey of building friendship and understanding and fighting for their land. And now you can see this story on the big screen. Rebel Sky Media is premiering the film RESERVE107 on Sunday afternoon, March 13th, at the Roxy Theater in Saskatoon. In the film, director Brad Leach catches the initial fears of some members of the Mennonite and Lutheran community, and through his lens we watch as that fear becomes a willingness and then a determination to walk with the people of young Chipewyan.
When the whole issue came up, I just wished it would go away, because I thought, well, this is our land. Why would they come and want to take that away from us? And why would somebody keep bringing this up? Let sleeping dogs lie.
This issue would not go away. We were always kind of hoping, well, it's going to go away. The government will step in and they'll solve this problem for us, right? But nothing was happening, and so it wasn't until 2006, I suppose, right? When Leonard said, these people would like to get together with you and just have a party.
There was just something bigger than we were at that meeting. There was just something that was beyond us, and that just quieted things down in me. So the knowledge that first became head knowledge and kind of not wanting this whole process to happen, it went from the head to the heart, and especially after the Stony Knoll get-together.
Also in the film, RESERVE107, is George Kingfisher, hereditary chief of the young Chipewyan Nation.
The Minister of Indian Affairs tried to say that we were all wiped out, there's no one alive from that young Chipewyan band. And I'm very much proof that I'm alive. on bloodline of the chief that signed the treaties at Fort Carlton. It was my great-great-grandfather.
Director Brad Leach acknowledges that this documentary was a commissioned work, but it did not take long, he says, before it turned into a passion.
Yeah, I had actually first heard about the story out here in Winnipeg, and I had heard rumors of it from a few different places, including it was also written in a book called Buffalo Shout, Salmon Cry. It had a mention in there. The project did start out as a commissioning and then did move into a partnership. And then the hope is to, at the end of this, to actually turn this film back over to the community participants that I think hope to use this film to continue sort of the peace process and reconciliation efforts.
The peace process and the reconciliation efforts, which are continuing, continued to progress through the filming of this, didn't it?
Yeah, they unfolded while we were there, which was really an exciting experience for us as filmmakers that are looking at ways to kind of see a story evolve in front of us.
140 years, we're still here, and our numbers are growing, and we haven't forgotten, and we have a claim. And our claim, the Stony Knoll claim, Stony Knoll Band 107, Young Chippewan, you know, there are stories behind these claims.
And that can sometimes be hard to capture, especially in a complicated process like a land claim that really is a story for these communities that have been unfolding for decades. So for us to just drop in as filmmakers and spend some time with participants, but to really have a chance to capture some very tangible moments that really demonstrate the heart and essence, I think, of their work was really quite beautiful, really quite astounding.
Leach says he was touched by how welcoming the people of Young Chippewayan were to allow an outsider like him into their homes. And one can tell from a conversation with him how he has learned to respect traditions and people. But he has also found the making of the film gratifying because, as he says,
I think I desire practical examples of peacemaking. I have studied conflict resolution at Canadian Mennonite University in Winnipeg, and I'm very much passionate about social issues and social justice, but I sometimes struggle with theoretical components of it and wanting to know what it practically looks like. So for me, as a filmmaker, to animate that in a very specific way, and then when it relates to the story of Reserve 107, it's really exciting because now you get to show people, you know, a bit of a model of what it may look like in their own context, and I think that's a big hope of this film too, is that people look at the stories and the histories and the treaties of the places that they live, and that they would learn about those and seek to want to know those and ultimately honor those.
To just be a church, the white steeple that towers over the town, and not to do anything about it, it's something that I think is shameful.
Reserve 107 premieres at the Roxy Theatre in Saskatoon Sunday, March 13th at 3:30 p.m. You can see the trailer for the documentary on our show page at Ckom or cjme.com/meetingground.